The first screen AutoFlow starts with is the chart details. The referring physician is to not be a doctor of CVP. This needs to be the OD or MD the patient is currently seeing. If the patient is not under the care of another physician, you can simply leave it as no referring by starting to free type the word no and selecting the doctor. The emergency contact will be listed here. This information is imported from the patient's pre-registration interview. You just need to ensure that the patient has listed the information in the correct order of first name, last name, phone number, and relation. If they have not, this will need corrected. The COVID consent to treat date box must be filled out. The patient will have already signed this during their pre-interview, but the date will need to be manually transferred. The privacy notice dates will be imported from when the patient signed this during their pre-registration interview, as well as whoever the patient has listed in their privacy notice notes. This gives us permission to speak to any other individual other than the patient about their medical records. The emergency contact needs to be listed in the privacy notice notes as well. You will then need to use the drop-down to select the notice reason. Typically, this is signed by patient. The next screen AutoFlow will take us to is the patient demographics screen. The patient name, address, phone number, email, social security number, if provided, it is not required, marital status, race, ethnicity, and preferred language will all transfer from the patient completing their pre-registration interview. With the implementation of the new reminder call system titled Vital Interaction that went into place in February, this pulls accurate cell phone and home phone information. The patient will receive a text message reminder of their appointment and a phone call reminder that will pull from their home phone screen as well. If the patient does not have a home phone, you can select the NA box. Same goes for the cell phone, day phone, alternate phone, and secondary phone. The only box that the NA box cannot be used is the email. An email must be listed and not be left blank. This counts towards MIPS measurements, which count towards goals that are needed to be obtained by the end of the year. And we must have a certain amount of patients enrolled into our patient portal. If the patient does not have an email address or wish to share, we must type in one of the following: none@email.com or declined@email.com. The next step is to then open the patient's insurance. First, you will want to ensure that the effective date is entered correctly by being the beginning of the year that we are currently in, or the actual effective date that can be found on the patient's insurance card. Not all insurance cards will have this information on the front. Typically, Medicare cards will have this. Next, you will need to ensure the copay field matches what is listed as the specialist copay in Freesia. If this is different, this could cause an automatic statement or refund to be issued to the patient. Next, you will access the insurance card screen. The push pin here indicates that there is an insurance card that has been scanned. You will then click on the insurance card to make sure that the back has been scanned in as well as the front. You will look at the created date to ensure that this has been scanned at the beginning of the year or within a calendar year. You will select OK to save your changes. The next screen AutoFlow takes us to is the Relation and Roles tab. If the patient is not the subscriber of the insurance, then a relation of the insurance subscriber will need to be created. To learn how to create a relation and role, please watch the video to create a relations and role. The next screen is Employer. The employer is not to be left blank. If the patient is retired, unemployed, disabled, or a student, that all must be entered here. If the patient needs to change or update the employer, you simply right-click New and attach the changed employer. by clicking enter and then double clicking on the employer you're needing. You select OK, and then the employer that is no longer needed can be right click and deleted. The next screen AutoFlow takes us to is the providers. There are 4 providers we must ensure we ask the patient. Their primary care provider, ophthalmologist or optometrist other than CVP, cardiologist, and endocrinologist. The OD or MD information was asked on the client chart details screen, the very first screen in AutoFlow. This should match what was collected from that screen. If the patient has a primary care provider, it will be entered here and on the demographics screen under primary care providers. These two should match. Sometimes this will automatically update and other times it will not. You must manually check this every time. If the patient does not have a PCP, you must enter no PCP. If this is left blank, it indicates to clinic staff that we did not ask the primary care physician and the patient may not have a letter of their visit go to their primary care provider. To add any physician to this page, you simply right-click New. You drop down the preference name and indicate which doctor you are entering. You select the flashlight or you are able to start to free type here. The bonus of selecting the flashlight is you are able to search as little or as much information of the provider you need, and then you are able to address this with the patient to confirm the address of the location of their physician. You then double click. The effective date will be the date that you entered this, and primary preference name will need selected. If any 4 of these are forgotten, that is fine. This box will not let you exit unless all 4 are selected. You then simply select OK. If the patient is no longer seeing a provider, this provider must be expired. To do this, you double click on the provider. You make the expiration date the day before the appointment. This is important to put this the day before because if not, the physician will still receive a letter for today's visit. You will then select the expiration reason and still select primary preference name and select OK. This will then enter here for the expiration reason of patient no longer seeing. Also, you must ensure that the effective date of the provider is within a year. Once you have confirmed this with the patient verbally or from what the patient has listed in their pre-registration interview, you will enter the date here by double-clicking and updating the effective date to the date within a year. The next screen AutoFlow takes us to is our privacy screen. This is where the HIPAA information is entered, but this was also on the chart details screen, the very first screen of our AutoFlow. Anything that needs to be edited from the first screen can also be done here. The HIPAA used to be required to be signed every 365 days, but as of April 2021, the patient only ever needs to sign this form one time ever, unless they make a change. The patient has the ability to change their HIPAA every pre-registration interview in Phreesia or can do so in office via the Phreesia pad or a paper form. This screen used to be a part of AutoFlow, but it is now removed. The consent to treat date is now no longer required to be entered as of May 2021. My apologies, the UDS screen, not the client defined screen. The UDS screen no longer needs to be documented and has been moved to the financial and billing policy. The consent to treat date form will then transfer into the patient's EHR chart and, like I stated, no longer needs to be documented. The next screen that AutoFlow takes us to is the Client Defined screen. The Client Defined screen is used to indicate if the patient has an interest in the quarterly newsletter that will be sent out in the mail about the CVP Foundation. If the patient does not want to receive these, you can simply opt out the patient under here through Foundation Declined. If the patient does wish to receive this, you may simply leave this blank or backspace on what was currently there. This needs a manual update from Phreesia into NextGen, and you will find the patient's interest or uninterest on the blue manual entry triangle. Finally, the last screen that we come to is the insurance selection screen. We need to ensure that we attach the insurance correctly on this screen by double-clicking on the insurance in the correct order that we push to the selected insurance. If the insurance was previously attached to a last encounter, then this will automatically populate in the selected insurance to be billed on future encounters. If the insurance has changed, you must remove it from the encounter by using the arrows to push it off of the selected insurance screen. As of April 2021, it is now required to enter the encounter copay. To enter the encounter copay, you must open the insurance by clicking on the policy number. The encounter copay will then populate to be entered in red. The practice level copay will usually never change unless the patient's insurance has changed their copay. This should match the specialist copay provided from Phreesia. The encounter copay will change depending on the patient visit. If the patient is having a normal appointment that requires a copay, these two numbers here will match. If the patient is having an appointment, such as a post-op appointment, or has a credit on their account, and a copay is not being collected for today's visit, then the encounter copay will be 0. And you will select OK. It is very important to make sure that the insurance is pushed in the correct order of primary and secondary, and that the insurance is attached correctly on this screen. Failure to do this will result in delayed insurance claims or possibly inaccurate bills to the patient. We then select AutoFlow. We are able to close out this screen. This is showing anything that the patient may owe, but we collect our money in Phreesia, so we can close out of here. As of May 2021, the last step to complete your AutoFlow is to return to Phreesia and place the patient in the process section by clicking the gray check mark. Once the patient is in the process section, this will then trigger for the workflow status to be automatically set to reception area for us. This will then indicate to clinic staff that the patient is checked in and their process is complete.